Now we're going to look at a couple specific examples involving order of operations, and then I will give you a couple of practice problems. So example number one, we want to consider actually two examples. We want to consider what would be true about 3 times 2 squared versus the quantity 3 times 2 squared. This illustrates order of operations clearly. In the first case, we have a multiplication right here in the middle, and then we have an exponent. So according to order of operations, we need to work with the exponent first. So let's rewrite this. We're going to leave the 3 alone. We have to do the 2 squared, work with the 2 squared prior to doing the multiplication. 2 squared means 2 times 2, a multiplication of 2 by itself twice, and we know that that should be 4. Now we're left with 3 times 4, which we know is 12. In the second case, we have parentheses to work with, so the parentheses are the first thing that we need to look at. The exponent comes second in our list. So we have to do what's inside of the parentheses first. So we have to multiply the 3 times the 2 first, and then we get 6. We could leave parentheses around that and square it. That could also be written as 6 squared. Since the parentheses are only around the number 6, they're not necessary. And that is a shorthand way of saying 6 times 6, which gets us to a value of 36 when we do the multiplication. So you can see we get very different answers depending on whether we use parentheses or don't use parentheses. Let me give you a second example. So, example 2. Let us consider 2 plus 4 times the quantity 5 minus 2 squared. So the first thing we have to do is look at parentheses. So our first step would be to analyze what's inside of there. So 5 minus 2 is 3. So I will rewrite what is in parentheses. I will leave it in parentheses and rewrite it that way. So 5 minus 2 simplifies to 3. Now, according to our order of operations, the next thing that we better look at is the exponent. So we have 3 squared, or 3 times 3. That would be 9. And also, let's make sure we remember from what we had covered before, there is an implied multiplication sign right there. We could look at it as a dot, or we could put an X there for multiplication. So when you don't see an operation, it's implied multiplication. So we're going to square the 3, and we have 2 plus 4 times 9, and that could be an X right here instead of a dot, but we wrote it as a dot. Now we have to go down our list, and multiplication takes precedence over addition. So we will do the addition last, and let's multiply the 4 times the 9 and get 36. And now we can add 2 and 36 and get a sum of 38. Now I'm going to give you a couple of example or practice problems. What would be wise to do is to look at the problem, get out a piece of paper, see if you can do it on your own, and then pause the video after I write down the problem, and then work it out. If you make a mistake as you're looking, you can play the video after you work it out, and when you get to a point where you made a mistake, if that happens, stop the video and see if you can correct your mistake, and then play the video and see if you agree with what the video has for an answer, and then repeat that for the second practice problem as well. So pause, work out the problem, and use the video as a guide to see if you're doing it correctly. So let me clear all of the ink, and let's write practice problem number 1. So practice number 1. So we'll have 3 times 2 plus the quantity 1 plus 4 squared times 4. Okay, so what do we do with this? Well, order of operations tells me that we have to first look at what's inside of the parentheses. So I have 3 times 2 plus, let's look at what's inside of the parentheses here. Looks like it's going to be a 5. So let me go change my color back again. And so we are going to have to square the 5. I can write the parentheses around the 5 or leave it. And then that will be multiplied by 4. Now going down my list, I have to work with exponents next. So the next thing that I will look at is squaring the 5. So I still have the 3 times the 2 plus 5 squared would be 25 times 4. Okay, and we're ready to keep going here. And so the next thing I have to worry about is multiplication. Now you can see there are actually 2 multiplications happening. So which one do I do first? Typically you would just read from left to right and do it that way. So if I were to switch back, I would say this is now 6 for the first one plus 25 times 4. And now I will do the second multiplication in the next step. Equals 6 plus 25 times 4 is 100. And now I'm left with a simple addition problem, so I get 106 as the final answer. Now, you may have asked, could you have completed that step and this step simultaneously? And the answer is yes. So since they're separated in the problem, if you wanted to do 3 times 2 and then add that to the product of 25 times 4, you would get to the same answer. So that would be a legitimate way of doing the problem. But we should all get the final answer of 106. So this step here could have been combined. You could have done both steps simultaneously and gotten to there all in one fell swoop. Now let me give you one more practice problem. So practice number 2. Again, write down the problem and work it out, and then try to see if you got the same answer that I did. Now this one has multiple parentheses. So it's very important when you have multiple parentheses to actually pair them up. So I am literally going to take my pen and I am going to mark these 2 innermost parentheses in red. In fact, I made a mistake here in my problem and I added a parentheses on the end that's not supposed to be there. There would be too many parentheses that don't pair. So let me go back down to the smaller cursor here. So we now are left with this problem. And you can see that the red parentheses are inside of the blue parentheses. So when you're working with multiple parentheses, you want to work from the inside out. So the first thing I'm going to do is 5 minus 3 because of the inner parentheses. You'll also notice I just wrote an equal sign here before writing 3 minus 2 times. When I subtract 5 minus 3, I will get 2. That will get squared plus 2. But back to the equal sign. I can write that on the left-hand side because I have a line below that is equal to the line above. I've simplified what is above. And you'll notice that each time I go down a line, I will write the same equal sign, and I try to keep the equal signs lined up throughout the problem. So if I go down the page, you'll see the equal signs stacked up. Everything that I write after the equal sign is equal to the line above it. So we need to figure out what the next thing would be. So we do have parentheses here, so this is a little bit more complicated because we have parentheses here, and we would think that we should do those first, but we have to do everything inside of the parentheses before completing any other operations. So inside of the parentheses, we have an exponent to worry about. So we have to do what's internal first, and then we'll worry about the things outside of the parentheses after we complete that. So the 3 minus 2 are all outside of the parentheses. Inside of the parentheses, we had a 2 squared, which we know is 4. And we will get 4. So we now have the expression inside of the parentheses simplified. I think it's fairly obvious. The next step would be to keep working inside of the parentheses, and the only thing left inside of the parentheses is 4 plus 2. Whereas in the step before, we had an exponent to worry about and we had an addition to worry about. Now we're down to just an addition inside of the parentheses. So 4 plus 2 is 6. Now don't forget, there's no operation listed between or written down between the 2 and the 6, so that's an implied multiplication. And therefore, we need to do the multiplication prior to the subtraction. 2 times 6 is 12. And 3 minus 12 is negative 9. And that is our answer.